That's right. It's fast enough.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are glad you're here, and give a welcome to Dr. Chelsea here, who is with us to help us think about good sleep. Here I thought, I give you the best 15 minutes of sleep every week during my sermon. I don't know. Well, you got to give time to get into it.
This is with your eyes shut, though.
Okay.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. Vicki is friends with my mother, and that's how she got in contact with me and said that you do this wonderful program, and I do give a lot of talks, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to come and tell you all about my personal passion, which is sleep and sleep health. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I grew up in Michigan. I was born and raised in Livingston County in the little town of Gregory. Came to Ann Arbor a lot. My family are big Michigan fans. And then when I went to college, I actually moved to Australia, and I went to college in Australia and lived there for 13 years. So I'm only just back about 6 months. I'm currently working at Wayne State at the Veteran Affairs Hospital in Detroit, where I work on clinical sleep research, specifically in the area of sleep apnea, but my background in neuroscience and sleep covers pretty much every area of sleep. So, obviously everyone sleeps, and we get a lot of sleep. In fact, we sleep for about a third of our entire life, which if you live to be about 80 years old, that means that you'll have spent 26 years of your life asleep. Now, that is a lot of sleep, considering that when we go to sleep, we lose consciousness, we're not aware of what's in our surroundings, we're not really getting anything done. So why did we develop this behavior that limits our ability to do things? Our more primitive ancestors would have had to take time away from hunting, fishing, gathering, and surviving in order to get this process completed. So what is it about sleep that's so important? And interestingly enough, we're not the only animals that sleep. Every single animal that has a brain, including fruit flies. So when I say has a brain, I don't mean animals like jellyfish or sponges. I specifically mean a functional brain. They have to sleep. So what is it about having a brain that means that we have to go to sleep? Why is it so important? Now, when a lot of people think about sleep, they just think of it as a time to get rest, a time to wind down. But sleep is actually a very dynamic process. And what that means is sleep not only accomplishes many different things in your body, but it's also very fluid. It changes throughout the night. So when we first go to sleep, we enter a very light stage of sleep. And most people fall asleep within 5 to 10 minutes of closing their eyes. Those are lucky people that don't have any issues with insomnia. But in general, it takes about an average of 5 to 10 minutes to fall asleep. Now, when you enter light sleep, you may not even be aware that you're sleeping, because light sleep kind of feels like being awake, just in a very restful state. So you're still aware of your surroundings. You're still able to be woken up very easily. You can hear things. You can think about things. Your thoughts might be wandering a little bit, but you still have some control over them. Once we are finished with light sleep, we go into more of a medium sleep, and this is stage 2. And this is where our brains are really calm. We're starting to lose conscious of our surroundings. We're not paying attention to noise. Our thoughts are pretty much out of our control, but they're still occurring. And we're a little bit harder to wake up at this point. Once we're finished with stage 2, we enter our deepest stage of sleep. And this might be our most important stage of sleep, but scientists are still trying to figure that out. So when we enter deep sleep, we're completely unconscious. We are completely unaware of our surroundings. We don't generally dream in our deep stage sleep, and our body is very still and we're very hard to wake up. Now, in the unfortunate event that we are woken up, this is where we're going to feel really groggy and confused and disoriented because our brain was in such a deep stage of sleep. And during this stage is when we accomplish a lot of the important functions that sleep does. These are a lot of restorative functions, functions that help us maintain our brain and body, help our immune system repair tissues that we may have damaged during the day. And finally, when we're done with deep sleep, we enter into REM sleep. Now, REM stands for rapid eye movement, and this is a stage where our brain is actually very active, almost as active as when we're awake. And this is typically when we experience dreams. So we're dreaming, our brain is active, our eyes are moving around quickly. We're fairly easy to wake up during this stage. However, our body is paralyzed. And the reason our body is paralyzed is so we don't act out our dreams. People who sleepwalk or punch and move around and talk during REM stage sometimes have just a little bit of a issue in their brain where their brain isn't fully able to paralyze them and put them down so they don't act out. I personally sleep talk during REM sleep. I talk a lot, actually. I have full conversations. And this is because my brain is just a little bit dysfunctional about being able to control my movement and my vocalizations when I sleep. So like I said, when we're sleeping, it's not simply one process. We're not simply just getting rest. Our body is actually going through a bunch of tasks to help us maintain our health and well-being. So the brain actually does a whole lot when we sleep. We remove wastes that collect in the brain during the day. We do something called synaptic downscaling, which is a big scientific word for allowing our brain to create new memories and store new information. We consolidate memories, where we move memories from our short-term memory into our long-term memory so that we can remember things for a long period of time. And we also go through emotional processing. Our bodies go through a bunch of processes, including energy conservation, healing and cellular repair, hormone release, and we also strengthen our immune system. So I'll go into these a little bit further. So during the day, we use a lot of energy. Our brain actually uses 30% of that energy. So all the energy you make, your brain is primarily using it. And when our earliest ancestors had very limited opportunities to find food and store energy, so our body has allowed us to go through a process of sleep where we're able to conserve some of that energy during the night and not use that energy all up during the day. Otherwise, we'd have to spend most of our time looking for food and resting. We wouldn't be able to accomplish all the tasks that we do during the day because we simply would not be able to eat enough and conserve enough energy to get those things done. Now, more recently in science, these genius scientists, not me, but some other scientists in the world, figured out that the brain goes through this amazing washing and cleansing experience while we're in our deepest part of sleep, so that third stage deep sleep. And what happens is, like I said earlier, the brain uses most of the energy in the body, 30%. And when you use energy, when your metabolism goes through the process of creating energy and using it, it creates a lot of waste as a byproduct. And these wastes are in the form of toxins and toxic proteins. For instance, one of the waste products is called beta amyloid. Is anybody familiar with beta amyloid? Okay, a few of you. So then the few of you might know that beta amyloid is the protein that's primarily responsible for developing Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And what happens is this protein accumulates in the brain, and it makes it very difficult for the cells, the neurons in the brain that transmit information, to be able to transmit and signal that information efficiently. And this can cause things like memory issues, mobility issues, and the other behaviors associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. So what our brain does to get around this is during sleep, our brain expands and swells. Not a lot, but just a little, just enough to create room between all of the cells within the brain. And then our fluid system, so our CSF, our cerebral spinal fluid, gets into gear and pushes through the brain. And it's like giving your brain a little scrub, because that fluid flow actually removes the large majority of toxins and releases it into your body, and then we expel it, usually, when we go to the bathroom. So that deep, refreshing sleep is so essential for keeping your brain intact and healthy and clean. And scientists have also found when we miss a single night's sleep, or we get 2 hours less of sleep a night, they can actually measure an increase in the amount of toxins, including that protein I was telling you about, beta amyloid. The brain will go through and clean it up eventually, but over time, if you're consistently not getting enough sleep, you're going to get an increasing level of buildup of those toxins, and it's not very healthy for your brain. So this is just a picture of a neural cell. So these are the communication cells and some of the waste buildup that you can see. So you can see that waste really gunks up the area and makes it difficult for these cells to communicate. Now the next process that happens in the brain, again, kind of a big scientific word, is synaptic downscaling. And synaptic downscaling is simply a term for the brain testing and deciding what information is important and what information is irrelevant that we store during the day. So the brain has millions of neurons, and these neurons communicate with each other by using trillions of connections. So this interweb of connections allows your brain to signal in specific sequences, and that sequence allows you to be conscious, allows you to form memories, allows you to talk, basically do all of the functions that your brain has to do to make us aware of our world and also control our bodies. But the brain does not have an unlimited amount of connections. So, trillions of connections seems like a lot, but you think of all the processes, all the things we have to do, a trillion connections is still limited. So every night when we go to sleep, if you learn new information or learn how to do a new task, your brain has to test that process to make sure it's actually important, to make sure whether it's actually relevant and worth storing in your brain. So for instance, if you're walking down the street and you see a bunch of leaves on the ground and you notice the leaves, your brain is automatically going to store that information. Now, is that important for the rest of your life, that you saw some leaves on the ground? Probably not. So what your brain is going to do is go through that synapse, that connection it made about those leaves, and it's going to downscale it, which means it's going to make the connection, it's going to either break the connection so it doesn't exist anymore, or it's going to make it less strong. Now, things that are more important, such as you met a friend on the street and the friend reminded you about a get-together you're having in a few weeks, told you the date, that's something obviously that you need to remember. So your brain is going to go and upscale or strengthen those connections so you have an easier time remembering. And this generally happens during your deep sleep phase. So again, deep sleep is incredibly important, and this is another reason why we need to make sure that we're getting enough sleep per night so that we're getting that restorative deep sleep, we're getting that brain waste clearance, we're getting that information correctly coded into your brain. So this is just a picture of two neural synapses or two connections communicating with one another. So you have a trillion of those in your brain. That's crazy. That's a lot.
How big are they?
Oh, microscopic, very tiny. Can't even, the little connections you can't even see without very specialized microscopes. Now, moving on to REM sleep. So REM is our dream sleep. This is again where our brain is very active. If you look at the brain waves with a device called an EEG, you can see that the brain is almost as active as an awake brain. In fact, your brain, from an untrained eye, it would look like your brain was awake. And when we're in REM sleep, we go through a process of memory consolidation. And what I mean by memory consolidation is memory storage. So during the day, again, we're going throughout our daily lives, we're always collecting new information. Even if you're not aware of it, you're learning things every second of the day. And your brain takes that information and it stores it in an area of your brain called the hippocampus. And that area is right here. So this little bit I'm pointing to. Now the hippocampus is like your short-term memory storage. It's like having a safe in your house. So it's not the bank. You're not putting your money in long-term storage, but you're keeping it in a safe until you can go and deposit it. When we go through REM sleep, our memories are moved from short-term storage into long-term storage, which is in the area of the prefrontal cortex. And being able to move that memory from short-term to long-term means you're going to be able to recall that memory from a few weeks to a month. Of course, you have to continually practice this memory and bring it up in order to keep it into long-term storage. But without REM sleep, we're not able to go through that process. This is why I always tell anyone who's trying to learn a task, especially students who are studying in school, do not cram. Do not stay up all night trying to learn something. Learn something and then go to bed, have a good night's sleep. Scientists have already proven that people who get a good night's sleep after learning a task become much more proficient at it and are able to learn that task faster. So again, coming back to REM sleep, our brain also goes through emotional processing. And I like to call this a little sleep therapy session. So we think dreaming potentially, and we really don't understand dreams. We don't understand why we dream. We think they might be a side effect of our brain going through all these processes. We're still trying to figure out what dreaming is and why we do it. But I'm sure most of you have noticed that your dreams are very strongly tied to your emotions, especially if you're feeling stress or fear or anxiety. How many people here have had a stressful dream when they're going through a stressful day at work? Or, yeah, it's really common. I always have a stressful dream about being back in high school when I have to do anything, and it's the worst dream. Anytime I have to perform something or have a lot of stress at work, I always end up back in high school in my dreams, and I hate it. But your brain will go over these emotions you experience during the day and sort of replay them at night and help you sort of dampen your feelings towards those emotions, help you kind of become more centered and bring them back. So for instance, people with post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, tend to dream more. And we think that's because they have such a high level of stress and anxiety that they need more REM sleep to help kind of go through those processes. Now, getting away from the brain, we also go through a lot of processes, biological processes in our body. Probably one of the main processes we go through is tissue repair. So during the day, even when we're not aware of it, our body accumulates a lot of damage. Not just at the physical level, say like a cut or a torn muscle, but at the cellular level. So we do a lot of damage to our DNA. And this is a problem because when we do damage to our DNA, this can eventually lead to diseases like cancers. So it's really, really important that the body's able to repair that DNA so we don't get these diseases further down the line. And when we're in deep sleep, our body repairs our tissues at the DNA level, but also at the cellular level and also at the larger level. So interestingly, we found in research that people who get more deep sleep not only repair their injuries faster, but they're less likely to get infections as well because they're repairing those injuries faster. And this was specifically studied in athletes who get a lot of injuries. So when you're hurt or injured, it's a really good thing to get as much rest as possible. This is why doctors tell you to put your legs up, spend some time in bed, because you're actually helping your body repair those injuries. We also release a massive amount of hormones when we sleep. So most of our hormones are released when we sleep. And we have so many hormones that affect so many different parts of our body. But the main hormone that we release during our sleep is called human growth hormone. How many of you have heard of human growth hormone? Yeah. So human growth hormone's actually been getting a lot of attention lately in the media because as we age, our human growth hormone declines. And there's been a lot of research showing that if we can replace that human growth hormone, we can actually decrease or slow down the aging process and also help us perform tissue repair. So before I was talking about tissue repair, well, human growth hormone is a really important part of telling the body to actually repair those tissues. So if we don't get enough sleep, we see that human growth hormone gradually decline. And this is a major problem for our overall health and well-being. So it's really important to get as much sleep as possible. And finally, we go through major processes in our immune system. So our immune system is a system of our body that fights off diseases such as viruses and bacteria and fungus. And our immune system goes through a process of strengthening, where when we sleep, our body tells our immune system to ramp up its activity. It kind of fine-tunes your immune system against specific viruses and illnesses that you may have come into contact with. The other thing it does is it releases more antibodies, which are one of the ways the immune system fights off diseases. So when your body is introduced to, say, a virus like the flu virus, after a certain amount of time, your body will create antibodies to that flu virus, and that will help your body find and destroy that virus. So without sleep, we're not efficiently allowing our body to fight off these diseases. And this is also perhaps why, when we're quite sick, we feel very tired. It's our body's way of telling us that we need to go to sleep and we need to rest and let it do its job. And people who don't get enough sleep, people who tend to sleep less than the average amount per night, and we usually say 7 to 9 hours a night is a good amount of sleep. So if you sleep 7 hours or less, we found that you're also more likely to get sick. So even though it's so essential for us to get good sleep so our body can go through all these processes, we live in such a fast-paced society. We have high-stress jobs, we have groups like our church groups, our friends and family, and we have all these obligations that kind of take up our day and make it more difficult for us to get the proper amount of sleep we need. So here's where I'm going to kind of switch modes and talk about what we can do as a society to get better quality sleep per night, because it's so essential. And I just want to show you some interesting statistics. So this is a sleep statistic by the CDC, which found that a certain percentage of people are getting much, much less sleep than recommended. And interestingly, Michigan is in that high area. 38 to 44% of us are not getting the recommended amount of sleep we need for night. And I looked at this demographic further, and I found out Ann Arbor specifically is especially poor at getting enough sleep. So obviously we need to be focusing a little bit more on sleep and making it more of a priority in our lives. So this is just a picture my friend drew of me sleeping at my desk. So what can we do to get good quality sleep at night? Well, I'm going to give you guys some great tips. First of all, this is my number one tip. So move this from your short-term memory to your long-term memory tonight. Keep a strict sleep schedule. You should be going to bed and getting up in the morning at the same time every single day. That means no sleeping in on weekends. That means no going to bed at night. And this is essential because our body is regulated on a 24-hour system, our internal clock, called our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is very, very fine-tuned to when we need to go to bed and when we need to wake up in the morning. Now, when we change those hours, our circadian rhythm gets incredibly confused and stops regulating your sleep. It stops making you tired when you should feel tired at night. It stops making you feel awake when you should feel awake in the morning. But when you go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, your circadian rhythm is going to be super fine-tuned. It's going to know exactly when to make you feel tired and want to go to bed. And it's going to wake you up before your alarm clock because it knows before you do when you should be getting up. So for instance, I never used to follow this rule. I used to go to bed at crazy hours. I used to get up at crazy hours. My sleep was all over the place. And it would get to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and I wouldn't feel tired at all. And that's because my brain just didn't know what time I needed to go to sleep. Well, now I'm on a very regulated schedule. I go to bed at 9:30 every single night and I wake up at 6 in the morning every single night. And my brain, as soon as 9 o'clock rolls around, I am tired. I am ready to get in bed. And around 5:30 every morning, I wake up a good half an hour before my alarm clock, feeling refreshed and motivated and ready to go. I no longer need to take naps. I get sufficient sleep. I don't wake up a bunch of times at night. And this is because my brain understands exactly what I need to do. And I know those of you in here who might have kids, I know that's really, really difficult, especially if you have young kids. I understand, so I'll give you a little bit of hope. Scientists know that for the first 6 years of a child's life, a parent is chronically sleep deprived, and there's no way of getting around that. However, especially for females, all the hormones you release as a new parent protects you from that sleep deprivation. So you're not doing a lot of long-term damage. But then, of course, you have to, work with teenagers as well, and they're especially difficult too. My next tip is once you get out of bed, stay out of bed. The only thing your bed should be for is sleeping and romance, nothing else. You should not be doing activities in bed. You should not be watching TV in bed. You should not be eating meals in bed. And I know I'm guilty of doing this too. Bed is comfortable. It's a great place to read. It's a great place to watch Netflix, but you have to train your brain that bed is a place for rest. It's not a place for stimulation. It's not a place for fun. It's simply a place to go to sleep. You can still be in your bedroom. You can get a lounge chair. You can lay down on your couch, but your bed should be for sleep only. So those of you that exercise, the best time of your day to exercise to get great sleep is in the morning. You are at peak alertness in the morning, the first few hours that you're awake. Your metabolism is at its best. You're releasing tons of energy. And when you exercise, you create a lot of feel-good hormones. You reduce cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and that sets you up for your entire day. So not only does that keep you energized throughout the day, but it also helps you fall asleep better at night. Now, a lot of people do exercise late in the afternoon or at night, and I say any exercise is good exercise. The problem with exercising late at night is you release a lot of energy hormones, adrenaline, for instance, epinephrine. These hormones stimulate you and make it harder to fall asleep. Runners, especially, There's something called runner's insomnia, which is a really common problem in elite runners. Elite runners have a really hard time going to sleep and staying asleep, and this is because their running schedules don't allow them to get rid of all of those energizing hormones before they go to sleep. Unfortunately for all of us coffee drinkers out there, and I'm a huge coffee drinker, no caffeine past 3 p.m. So this is especially true for coffee, but also pop with caffeine in it, energy drinks, a lot of different teas, and also chocolate. Chocolate has caffeine in it too. Caffeine binds to receptors in your brain, and it stimulates your brain so that your brain cannot go through that process it needs to fall asleep. So even if you're feeling exhausted and feel like, well, I can have a coffee and I'm so exhausted, I'll still be able to sleep. You might feel exhausted, but as long as that caffeine is bound to those receptors in the brain, your brain will not actually be able to initiate sleep properly. And you want to give yourself some time to allow that caffeine to get well out of your system before you try to go to sleep. So no caffeine past 3 p.m. No food right before bedtime. And when I mean no food before bedtime, usually I mean about an hour to an hour and a half. Now you don't want to go to bed hungry. That's also problematic, but you don't want to go to bed too full either, because your body is going to put more attention into digesting your food than it is to going to sleep. And other problems can occur, such as you can have an upset stomach or acid reflux, and that can also keep you awake. So be full, but not too full, and don't eat right before bed. This is a really important one. No screens before bedtime. So recently, scientists have figured out that our electronic devices, such as our phones, our TVs, our computer screens, emit blue light. And blue light is very similar to the light of the sun. And the light of the sun is a signal for our brains to be awake and not go to sleep. So what's happening is when we're sitting around at night looking at these screens, we're confusing our brains. Our brains think the sun is still out and it's not time to go to bed. And what's happening is our brains create a sleep hormone called melatonin. How many of you have heard of melatonin? You can buy it. You can buy it at the pharmacy. It's pretty well known. Melatonin is suppressed in the brain when your eyes receive signals from the sun. So sunlight comes into your eyes. It tells this little gland right here in your brain, the pineal gland, to stop making melatonin. When it gets dark, that pineal gland really ramps up its activity of melatonin. And your melatonin is exactly what tells your brain it's time to go to bed. So it is absolutely essential that you stop using electronic devices at least an hour before bedtime, if not more. I always say for myself, I usually give myself about 2 hours. And try to do other activities if you're bored. I like to read personally. Some people like to play board games or cards. Some people like to listen to the radio or music. That's all fine as long as you're not looking at screens. And a lot of people are using blue light blockers nowadays as well at night. My boyfriend wears these hilarious looking blue light blocker glasses all night long, and I don't even wear them, and he just looks hilarious. Because they're so big and bulky, but they probably help him quite a bit. So here's a really interesting one that not a lot of people know about. One thing you can do to really kick off good sleep is to have a hot shower or bath right before you go to bed. Now, the reason for this is because before we can go to sleep, our brain has to drop its temperature by about 1 degree. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually very difficult for our body to change its temperature. But we can trick our brains into believing that it's dropped by 1 degree by taking a really hot shower, raising our body temperature, and then getting out and allowing ourselves to cool down. That really kickstarts our brain into sleep mode. And a lot of people find it extremely helpful. And not only that, but it's also very relaxing to have a hot shower as well. And you want to try to relax before you go to bed. Next thing is to keep it cool. Keep your bedroom cool. Hot conditions are terrible for sleep. Again, because we have to reduce our body temperature by 1 degree Celsius, or 1 degree Fahrenheit, sorry. You should keep your bedroom temperature around 70 degrees or less.
That's hot.
For some people it's still hot. For me it's still hot. But that is the minimum you should keep your bedroom temperature. So even if you keep your house at 72 degrees during the day, you should try lowering it down at night. And if you don't have internal air, you could always crack a window, or you can also buy cooling pads that you can put on your bed. So there's some really neat electronic mattress toppers you can buy nowadays that will actually keep you cool all night long. And of course, this one's probably quite obvious, but keep it dark. Again, with the light pollution, we live in a society where we live really close together now. There's street lights and electronic devices. You preferably keep your room as dark as possible. One of the best investments you can do for your health is get a good pair of light blocking blinds. And if that doesn't work, in my case, you can always get a sleep mask that you can use. And it is sort of annoying for the first few nights, but you will find that after a while you love it and you'll always use it and you can't sleep without it. And of course, keep it quiet. Another one, hard to do because a lot of us, share beds or have kids or have pets, but it's absolutely essential that you keep your room as quiet as possible so you can get good sound quality of sleep. I sleep with earplugs. Again, it can take a few days to get used to them, but they're a really good investment. And finally, if nothing else works, or if you're having severe sleep problems, or you think you have a sleep disorder, or your husband or wife tells you you have a sleep disorder, it's time to go see a doctor. A lot of people put off seeing a health professional about their sleep, but more and more we're starting to understand the effects of poor sleep. They're so detrimental. Poor sleep is associated with heart disease, diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, mental health disorders, poor immune system, illness. Pretty much every aspect of our life is associated with how much sleep we're getting at night. So go talk to your doctor if you think you have an issue, and hopefully you can get the help that you need. And that is pretty much it for my talk. So thank you for listening, and I am happy to take any and all sleep questions you have, even if they're not related to this talk, about the science or the health of sleep, or if you have a personal question, let me know. I'm happy to answer.
What's your best recommendation for rotating shifts? Like sometimes my earliest shift is 6 a.m. and then I'll work until 2 or 2:30, and then the next day I'm 4 p.m. to midnight.
Yeah, so shift work is a huge problem. Before I started doing clinical research, I specifically worked with shift workers, sleep coaching. We're still out on the best approach, but because you're always changing your circadian rhythm, and it's really difficult to get consistent sleep, we focus more on not necessarily the hours of sleep you get, but the quality of sleep you're getting. So we try to help you get the best quality sleep that's possible. So in the case of shift workers, it's really about maintaining the best quality sleep environment you can possibly have. So we are, in that case, talking about keeping a really cool, quiet, dark room. Melatonin, not so good for shift workers because that's more for regulating your circadian rhythm, but your circadian rhythm is already dysregulated, so that's not gonna help you. But it's more of focusing on those lifestyle factors. Yeah.
Is did I miss establishing your best length of sleep? Like you said, when you went, I know it, is it 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours? is there a system whereby we can establish or should establish what is that number that we should not go under nor need to go over?
Yep, so sleep actually changes throughout your life. So most of you already know babies sleep a lot, and that's because their brains are developing. And children sleep a lot because their brains are developing. And teens sleep a lot, but teens also have something called delayed sleep phase syndrome, which means for whatever reason when they're going through puberty, their body clock shifts to a later time. So even though they want to get 12, 13 hours of sleep, they don't feel tired until it's late at night and they want to get up late in the morning. And this is why it's such a problem currently with our school start times, is that doesn't really allow for what we know about the teenager's biological clock. Fortunately, once they reach adulthood, that kind of normalizes, and that's when we get into that average amount of sleep that most people talk about, which is 7 to 9 hours. So we need on average 7 to 9 hours. And adults stay in that range for the rest of their life. Now, when you reach middle age, and as you continue aging, your sleep starts shifting backwards, where you go to bed earlier and you get up earlier, and that's completely normal. And there is a misconception that seniors need less sleep. That is wrong. Seniors still need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. They just don't feel like it because their schedules are shifted, and they also tend to get sleep fragmentation, which means that you tend to fall asleep easily, but you wake up a lot during the night. Now, to determine how much sleep you specifically need, the best way to do that is to give yourself a night without any priorities the next day. No alarm clocks, no distractions. Go to bed when you feel tired. Mark down what time you go to bed. Wake up when you feel like you've had enough sleep. Mark that time down. Do that a few times and then take the average, and that should give you roughly the amount of sleep that you personally need. Now, I'm a long sleeper. I like to get about 9 hours of sleep per night. I find that if I get anything less, I'm pretty groggy during the day, but you might be a 7-hour sleeper. You know, you might be an 8.5-hour sleeper. Everyone is different. So as long
and
as
you can get all this extra stuff done that you need to do with that amount whenever you go fall asleep and wake up.
That's right. That's right. And think about like how energized you'll be, and maybe you won't be able to fit in as much into your day, but you'll be able to do things more efficiently because you have more energy, you have more focus, you just feel better.
What about recurrent dreams? What do we know about them? Why do people have them? Are they common?
Mm-hmm.
I have recurrent dreams when I'm highly stressed. Variation on a theme every time.
Yep. Yeah, so dreams are highly connected to your emotions. And they may not come off. So if you're having a stressful day at work, you might not necessarily dream about work, but you'll have a stressful dream. And a lot of times, a stressful event will be tied to a specific dream that has nothing to do. So in my case, like I was saying, my stressful dream is being back in high school. Except I know that I'm an adult and I don't need to be in high school, but they put me at a desk and make me take a test anyway, and don't believe me when I tell them I already finished high school. So our brains are really good at associating memories with emotions. Memories and emotions are highly tied. So if you're feeling a specific emotion, you might dream about something related to a stressful memory. And that's completely normal, and most people have recurrent dreams.
What about the opposite end of the spectrum, where I don't feel like I dream? I very rarely ever remember a dream.
So you in that case, you probably do dream. But people who remember their dreams are usually the ones who wake up during REM sleep. So they wake up immediately in the middle of the dream. You're probably not waking up in REM sleep. You're probably waking up in stage 1 or 2 because our sleep cycles several times throughout the night. This is completely normal. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means that your brain is transitioning into a different stage before you wake up.
I know you're supposed to you get the same amount every night, but what if you are chronically sleep deprived during the week You still stay sleep deprived during the weekend?
So there's a lot of debate about whether it's possible to catch up on sleep and kind of reverse the damage you're doing during the week. We call this sleep debt. So
Sleep what?
sleep
Debt.
debt, like credit card debt.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's like during the week you're putting money on your credit card. You're only using your credit card, and you're only paying off some of it on the weekend. Well, if you put $300 on your credit card during the week, but only pay off $50 of it on the weekend, you've still got debt there. So that's what's happening. We don't think you can fully recover. You can recover a little bit, but we don't think you can fully reverse the damage that's been done.
It still seems to me better to try to reverse some of it than
Yeah.
none of it.
Anything is better than nothing when it comes to sleep. So, you know, if you can catch up on any sleep during any time, do it. Take naps, do what you have to do, because anything's better than nothing.
What do you think about melatonin? Our daughter is 8 years old, and she struggled with falling to sleep since she was two years old. And then at our annual physical with our primary care physician, she suggested melatonin. And so I started giving her melatonin, and now myself and my 11-year-old and the 8-year-old are now going to sleep earlier because the 8-year-old is taking melatonin. But I guess I wanted to hear what you have to say about the science about melatonin and whether there's a long-term impact. And
Yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong with taking melatonin. It's a completely natural hormone. Our body makes it. It's the hormone in the pill is no different than what our body makes. You can't overdose on melatonin. It would be, you have to take bottles and bottles and bottles of it. It doesn't make you sick. There's no, nasty effects of melatonin. The problem with melatonin is, the main issue is you can become dependent on it. So if you are without your melatonin for whatever reason, you might have an incredibly difficult time. And the other thing is, if you're constantly supplementing with melatonin, your brain doesn't need to make as much melatonin. So your brain can kind of forget how to make melatonin after a while, and it might, if you decide to stop taking it, it might, take a while to get back into a normal routine.
Increase it.
Yeah, so you can wean off of it. That's definitely one thing you can do. The other issue with melatonin, and this is over-the-counter melatonin, is it's not regulated by the FDA, which means that you might be getting a bottle of 5 milligram melatonin, but there's no guarantee that melatonin is actually 5 milligram. It could be less, it could be more. You don't really know what you're getting unless you get a prescription. So ideally, you would be getting a prescription that's made in a compound pharmacy, so you know exactly how much you're getting.
or maybe a reputable brand.
Yeah, exactly. So again, nothing wrong with melatonin. You just have to be careful about how you use it.
I think I've read that some people don't make enough melatonin for some whatever genetic reason or whatever.
Yeah, there's probably definitely a genetic factor, and also you tend to make less as you age, as most hormones, unfortunately.
What percentage of people are having a hard time falling asleep because of apnea?
Oh, it's 29%. Yeah, I know that because I specifically work with people who have sleep apnea. And it's getting higher. And there's a reason it's getting higher. It's because we have an aging population, and it's more associated with age. And also we're living unhealthy lifestyles, which is also highly associated with developing sleep apnea.
And I hear also weight.
Yes, weight, definitely weight. So there's two types of sleep apnea. There's obstructive sleep apnea, where your throat basically closes up and collapses and you can't breathe. And then there's central sleep apnea, which is more rare. It's a neurological disorder where your brain forgets to tell your body to breathe. Yeah. Central is much more rare. Obstructive sleep apnea is probably, that and insomnia are probably the most common sleep disorders.
When you showed that map of that our area is really low on sleep, why do you think that is?
I think because we have a lot of highly educated, highly intelligent people in Michigan, and people who work very hard in industries like the auto industry, and they tend to believe they can do more with less sleep.
So we got a lot of more shift work over history.
And shift work as well.
A lot more people who had odd shifts.
That's right.
And the
That's
news
right.
goes on at 11 instead of 10.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yes. So I don't know what makes Michigan particularly sleep deprived, but that would be my personal guess.
It
Yeah.
looked like it was also the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
No? All set?